When Austin Ford walked into attorney Mike's office with evidence of his company hiding fatal drug side effects, he thought he was doing the right thing. 24 hours later, Pharmaceutical CEO Victor Malone made him an offer, $20 million to disappear and keep his mouth shut forever. Austin refused. Within 48 hours, he vanished without a trace, leaving behind a wife, 2 children, and a USB drive that would expose how one corporation's greed led to hundreds of preventable deaths. For 3 years, his family searched. The company claimed he'd stolen funds and fled the country. The media called him a fraud, but investigative journalist Valerie Kim never stopped digging. What she discovered in Mike's confidential case files would unravel one of the largest pharmaceutical cover-ups in history and reveal that Austin Ford's disappearance was just the beginning. This is his story. This is the price of truth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The afternoon sun filtered through the blinds of Mike's office, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk stacked with case files. Valerie Kim sat across from him, her recorder positioned between them, red light blinking steadily. She'd been chasing this story for 18 months, and every lead had gone cold until she found Mike's name buried in sealed court documents. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me, she began, her voice measured but urgent. I know Austin Ford's case is complicated, but his family deserves answers. The public deserves the truth. Mike leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment. He'd turned down dozens of interview requests, but something about Valerie's persistence reminded him why he'd taken Austin's case in the first place. Some stories demanded to be told, regardless of the cost. What do you know about Valorex Pharmaceuticals, he asked. Major player in pain management, $30 billion in annual revenue. Victor Malone took over as CEO in 2018 and turned the company around financially. She paused, watching his expression. But that's the official story, isn't it? The official story rarely tells you what happens behind closed doors. Mike pulled a thick folder from his desk drawer. Austin Ford came to see me on March 15, 2021. He was head of clinical trials at Valorex, 14 years with the company. Brilliant scientist, devoted father, the kind of person who still believed the system worked. Valerie leaned forward. What changed his mind? He discovered something that should never have been hidden. Valorex's flagship pain medication, Narrated, was fast-tracked through FDA approval based on clinical trial data that showed minimal side effects. The drug generated $8 billion in its first year alone. Doctors prescribed it for everything from post-surgical pain to chronic back problems. Millions of people trusted it. The weight of those words settled between them. Valerie knew where this was heading, but hearing it directly from Mike made it real in a way that leaked documents never could. Austin's team was conducting post-market surveillance, standard protocol for any new drug. Within 6 months of Narrated hitting pharmacies, they started seeing patterns. Patients were developing sudden cardiac events, strokes, kidney failure. The numbers were small at first, easy to dismiss as coincidental, but Austin was thorough. He cross-referenced patient data, medical histories, dosage information. Mike opened the folder, revealing pages of highlighted medical reports and statistical analyses. By month 9, the pattern was undeniable. Narrated was causing fatal complications in approximately 3% of long-term users. That might sound small, but when you're talking about millions of prescriptions, 3% means thousands of preventable deaths. Valerie's pen moved rapidly across her notepad. Why wasn't this reported to the FDA? That's exactly what Austin wanted to know. He brought his findings to his direct supervisor, Dr. Patricia Chen, expecting her to immediately halt distribution and launch a full investigation. Instead, she told him his methodology was flawed and ordered him to bury the data. She was covering it up. At Victor Malone's direction, yes. Austin didn't realize it at the time, but Valorex had known about the cardiac risk since the original clinical trials. They deliberately excluded high-risk patients from their test groups and manipulated the data presented to the FDA. If the truth came out, they'd face criminal charges, billions in lawsuits, and the complete destruction of their company. Victor Malone had too much to lose. The room felt colder suddenly. Valerie had investigated corporate corruption before, but the casual way these executives gambled with human lives never stopped shocking her. "So Austin came to you," she said. "He came to me because he'd already tried everything else. He'd gone to the company's ethics hotline, which reported directly to Malone. He documented everything, hoping internal pressure would force them to do the right thing. Instead, they started following him. His emails were monitored. Security cameras tracked his movements. They made it clear he was being watched." Mike's jaw tightened, the memory clearly still fresh. Austin was terrified. He had a wife, Sarah, and 2 kids, Emma and Jacob, 8 and 6 years old. He kept thinking about all the families out there, people taking Neuroclear with no idea they were playing Russian roulette with their hearts. He couldn't stay silent. "What did he bring you?" "Everything. USB drives with raw trial data, internal emails between executives discussing the cardiac risks, financial projections showing they'd factored lawsuit settlements into their profit margins. They literally budgeted for killing people because it was still more profitable than pulling the drug." Valerie felt sick. That's premeditated. That's corporate murder dressed up in spreadsheets and quarterly earnings calls. Mike closed the folder. "I told Austin we had enough to bring a major lawsuit, possibly even trigger a federal investigation, but I also warned him what would happen next. Victor Malone doesn't build $30 billion empires by playing fair. The moment we filed, Austin's life would become a war zone. He filed anyway. He was about to. We had everything prepared, ready to submit to the court, and simultaneously leaked to the press to prevent any cover-up. Then the night before we were scheduled to file, Austin got a visitor. The office seemed to hold its breath. Valerie's recorder captured every word, every pause. Victor Malone himself showed up at Austin's house at 11 p.m. No lawyers, no security, just him. He sat in Austin's living room and made him an offer. Mike's voice dropped lower. $20 million, tax-free, deposited in an offshore account. All Austin had to do was destroy the evidence, sign an NDA, and disappear. Take his family, start over somewhere else, and never speak about Valerix again. $20 million to let people die. $20 million to become complicit. Austin told him to get out of his house. He called me immediately after, shaking, furious, more determined than ever to expose everything. Mike paused, and Valerie saw something dark cross his face. That phone call was at 11:47 p.m. on March 22nd, 2021. It was the last time anyone heard from Austin Ford. Valerie's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" The next morning, Austin never showed up at my office for our final meeting before filing. His wife called me at noon, panicked. He'd left for a morning run at 6 a.m. and never came home. His car was in the driveway. His phone was on the kitchen counter. His running shoes were missing. Mike met her eyes directly. Austin Ford vanished without a trace. And by the end of that day, Victor Malone had convinced the world that Austin had stolen $20 million from the company and fled the country. But I knew the truth. He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Austin never took that money," which means someone else did, and they framed him for it. Valerie sat frozen, processing the implications. "You're saying Victor Malone orchestrated Austin's disappearance and then used the $20 million offer as evidence that Austin was corrupt?" "Exactly." Brilliant, actually, in the most horrifying way possible. Mike stood and walked to his window, looking out at the city below. Within hours of Austin being reported missing, Valerix released a statement claiming they'd discovered irregularities in their research department accounts. They alleged Austin had embezzled funds and fled to avoid prosecution. They provided transaction records showing $20 million transferred to an offshore account in Austin's name. But you said Austin refused the money. He did, which means someone at Valerix created those transactions after the fact. They turned Victor's offer into evidence of Austin's supposed crime. In one move, they discredited him completely and provided a motive for his disappearance. The media ran with it immediately. Greedy scientist steals millions and abandons family. Austin went from whistleblower to villain overnight. Valerie's mind raced through the implications. His evidence, the USB drives, the documents gone. Austin had kept copies at his house, in his office at Valerix, and backup files he was supposed to bring me that morning. After he vanished, federal agents raided his home within 48 hours, claiming they were investigating the embezzlement. They seized his computers, file cabinets, everything. His office at Valerix was cleaned out the same day. Every piece of evidence disappeared into the system. What about your copies? You said he'd already brought you documentation. Mike's expression darkened. 3 days after Austin vanished, my office was broken into. Professional job, no forced entry, security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. They took only one thing, Austin's case file. Every document, every USB drive, every piece of evidence he'd given me, it was a message. The threat hung in the air between them. Valerie understood she wasn't just investigating a story, she was walking into an active cover-up that had already disappeared one man and wouldn't hesitate to silence others. Did you go to the police? I went to everyone, police, FBI, state attorney general's office. But here's the problem. Without Austin and without the evidence, I had nothing but accusations against one of the most powerful pharmaceutical companies in the country. Valerix had already shaped the narrative. They had transaction records. They had witnesses claiming Austin had been acting strangely. They even produced emails supposedly showing Austin planning to flee the country. Quick pause. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. All fabricated, all professionally fabricated by people with unlimited resources and no conscience. And it worked. The investigation focused on finding Austin as a fugitive, not as a missing person. His wife, Sarah, was devastated. She knew her husband would never abandon their family, but no one believed her. The media portrayed her as either complicit or naive. Valerie felt anger rising in her chest. What about the drug? If Austin was right about Neuroclear causing deaths, couldn't you prove that independently? That's what I tried to do. I started contacting families who'd lost loved ones after taking Neuroclear, looking for patterns, but Valerix was already ahead of me. They'd settled wrongful death claims quietly, always with strict NDAs attached. Anyone who talked to me risked losing their settlement money. Most were too scared or too grief-stricken to fight. Mike returned to his desk, pulling out another folder. But I found 3 families who were willing to risk everything. Janet Morrison, whose husband died of a stroke at 42. David Chin, whose mother had a fatal cardiac event at 58. And Marcus Thompson, whose sister developed kidney failure that killed her within weeks. All of them perfectly healthy before starting Neuroclear. All of them dead within a year of taking it. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. I brought their cases to the FDA as a formal complaint, demanding they investigate Neuroclear's safety data. I thought if I could force a review, the truth would come out even without Austin's evidence. He shook his head bitterly. 2 weeks later, the FDA announced they'd conducted a thorough review and found no safety concerns. Valerix had people inside the agency, people who made sure the investigation went nowhere. Valerie's frustration matched his own. So they buried it completely. Austin's gone, the evidence is destroyed, and the families have no recourse. For 3 years, that's exactly where it stood. Austin's family held out hope, but as time passed, even they started to doubt. Maybe he had stolen the money. Maybe the pressure had broken him. Maybe he really had abandoned them. Valerix kept selling Neuroclear, kept making billions, and the bodies kept piling up. Why are you telling me this now? Valerie asked. What changed? Mike's eyes glinted with something she couldn't quite read. Vindication, maybe, or justice finally within reach. 6 months ago, I got a call from an unlisted number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. The room seemed to contract around them. Valerie's heart pounded. It was Austin. The words hit like a physical blow. He's alive? He's alive. He'd been in hiding for 3 years, moving constantly, living under assumed names. He sounded exhausted, paranoid, broken, but he was alive. Mike's voice filled with an intensity that made Valerie lean closer, and he told me he'd been watching everything. He knew about the smear campaign, knew about my office being robbed, knew about the families I'd tried to help. He'd wanted to come forward 1,000 times, but he was terrified they'd kill him before he could expose the truth. What made him finally reach out? His daughter Emma turned 11. He'd missed 3 birthdays, 3 Christmases, 3 years of her life. He called me because he realized that hiding wasn't protecting his family. It was letting Victor Malone win. And as long as Malone was free, everyone Austin loved was still in danger. Valerie's pulse raced. Where is he now? Safe, hidden. We've been working together for 6 months, rebuilding the case. from scratch. Austin had been smart enough to keep one backup that Valerix never found, a cloud storage account under a fake identity containing copies of everything, the trial data, the emails, the financial projections, all of it. Then you have them. We have everything we need to destroy Valerix and put Victor Malone in prison for the rest of his life. Corporate fraud, manslaughter, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, the list goes on. Mike's smile was grim. But here's the problem. If we file publicly, Malone will know Austin's alive and where to find him before we can get protective custody arranged. We need to move carefully. That's why you agreed to this interview, Valerie realized. You need the story public before you file, so there's too much attention for them to make Austin disappear again. Exactly. If the world knows Austin's alive and what he's about to reveal, killing him only proves he was telling the truth. We're filing the lawsuit in 72 hours, and I want your story published the same day. Maximum exposure, maximum pressure, no room for cover-up. Valerie nodded, understanding the stakes. I'll need to verify everything. I'll need to speak with Austin directly. I expected that. He's willing to go on record, but only if certain security measures are in place. Are you prepared for what happens next? Mike's expression was deadly serious. Victor Malone has made people disappear before. He'll come after you too. I'm prepared. Valerie met his gaze without flinching. People died because of his greed. More people are dying every day. If Austin's brave enough to come forward after 3 years in hiding, I'm brave enough to tell his story. Good, because there's something else you need to know. Mike opened his desk drawer and pulled out a photograph. It showed Victor Malone at a charity gala shaking hands with someone Valerie recognized immediately, Senator Richard Breslin, chair of the Senate Health Committee. Malone's political connections go deeper than anyone realizes. He's been funding campaigns for years, building relationships with the exact people who are supposed to regulate him. When this breaks, it's not just Valerix that'll fall. Valerie stared at the photograph, understanding finally crystallizing. This is bigger than one pharmaceutical company. This is about a system that protects the powerful and disposes of anyone who threatens them. Austin was supposed to be erased completely. Another cautionary tale about what happens when you challenge the wrong people. Mike's voice hardened. Instead, he's about to become the reason that entire system comes crashing down. When can I meet him? Tomorrow night. Secure location. Conditions he'll specify. But Valerie, Mike caught her arm as she stood to leave. Once you walk into that meeting, there's no going back. These people have unlimited resources and no boundaries. They will try to destroy you. She didn't hesitate. Tell Austin I'll be there. As Valerie left his office, Mike sat alone in the growing darkness, staring at the photograph of Victor Malone. For 3 years, he'd watched that man walk free while Austin's family suffered and innocent people died. Tomorrow, that would finally change. But first, he had to make sure Austin survived long enough to tell his story, because Mike had lied to Valerie about one thing. He'd said they had 72 hours before filing the lawsuit. In truth, Victor Malone had discovered Austin was alive 3 days ago, and he'd already sent people to finish what he'd started. The downtown parking garage was nearly empty at 9 p.m., just a few scattered vehicles under flickering fluorescent lights. Valerie pulled into the spot Mike had specified, third level, northeast corner, exactly where you could see anyone approaching from multiple directions. Her hands were steady on the wheel, but her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd spent the day preparing copies of her research sent to 3 separate lawyers, a dead man's switch on her laptop that would automatically publish her preliminary findings if she didn't check in every 12 hours. She'd learned from Austin's mistakes. This time the evidence wouldn't disappear quietly. A dark sedan pulled in 2 spaces away. Mike emerged first, scanning the garage with practiced caution, then nodded to the passenger. The man who stepped out looked nothing like the confident scientist from the corporate photos Valerie had studied. Austin Ford had lost 20 pounds, his hair was longer and graying at the temples, and his eyes carried the haunted look of someone who'd spent 3 years looking over his shoulder. But he was alive. That was what mattered. "Thank you for coming," Austin said quietly as they met between the vehicles. His voice was rougher than she'd expected, worn down by years of fear and silence. "Thank you for trusting me." Valerie kept her recorder visible in her hand. "Is it okay if I record this?" Austin glanced at Mike, who nodded. That's why we're here. I need people to hear what really happened. I need my family to know I didn't abandon them. They sat in Valerie's car, Mike in front, Austin in back where he could watch the entrance. The journalist in Valerie wanted to dive straight into questions, but the human in her needed to acknowledge what this man had survived. Your wife and children, she began gently. Do they know you're alive? Pain flickered across Austin's face. They think I'm dead. Sarah held a memorial service last year. Mike was there. He told me about it. Emma and Jacob stood up and talked about memories of their father. His voice cracked. I watched the video 100 times. My little girl saying she missed her daddy, and I couldn't even tell her I was alive. Why didn't you contact them? Because Victor Malone was monitoring them. Phone taps, surveillance, the works. He was waiting for me to reach out so he could trace the call and find me. As long as Sarah believed I was gone, she and the kids were safe. But if she knew I was alive and hiding, Malone would have used them as leverage to force me out. Valerie's anger toward Malone intensified. Walk me through what happened the night you disappeared. Mike told me about Malone's offer, but what happened after you refused? Austin took a breath, organizing memories he'd replayed countless times. After Malone left my house, I called Mike immediately. I was furious, determined to file the lawsuit the next day and expose everything. I couldn't sleep, so I went over my evidence one more time, making sure every document was in order. Around 2 a.m., I finally went to bed. But you went for a run at 6 a.m. That's what everyone thinks. Truth is, I woke up around 5:30 to a text from an unknown number. It said, your family's being watched, run now or they die. That was it. No explanation, no instructions, just that message. Valerie's blood chilled. You believed it? I looked out my bedroom window and saw a car parked across the street that hadn't been there when I went to bed. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat, watching my house. I looked up and down the street and counted 3 more vehicles, all with occupants, all positioned where they could see every exit. Austin's hands trembled slightly at the memory. I knew in that moment that if I tried to leave normally, if I tried to take Sarah and the kids, we'd never make it. Malone had sent a message. I could run alone, or my family would pay the price. So you staged the morning run. I grabbed my running clothes, left my phone behind like I always did when I ran, and went out the front door like it was a normal morning. I ran my usual route for the first mile. Then I deviated. There's a wooded area near the park where the trail gets isolated. I ran into the trees and just kept going, crossed through backyards, jumped fences, stayed off main roads. I had no plan, no money, nothing but the clothes I was wearing. Mike interjected. Austin had opened a small emergency account years earlier, just a few $1,000s under a distant cousin's name. It was the only resource Malone didn't know about. He used that to survive the first few months. I lived in my car for weeks, sleeping in different places every night. I bought a burner phone and obsessively checked news about my disappearance. That's when I saw Valerix's press release claiming I'd stolen $20 million. I watched my face on the news labeled as a thief and a deadbeat father. I watched Sarah crying, defending me to reporters who clearly didn't believe her. The rawness in his voice made Valerie's chest tight. You couldn't risk contacting her. Every time I almost broke, I thought about that text. They die. I couldn't take that chance. So I stayed dead and watched Valerix bury everything I'd tried to expose. They painted me as a criminal and made sure Neuroclear stayed on the market. Austin's jaw clenched. Do you know how many people died while I was hiding? I tracked it obsessively. News reports, obituaries, social media posts from families mourning loved ones who died from unexpected cardiac events or sudden complications. I counted over 400 deaths directly linked to Neuroclear in the 3 years I was gone. 400 people, 400 that I could verify. The real number is probably much higher, all because I wasn't brave enough to fight back. The guilt in his voice was crushing. You were trying to protect your family, Valerie said firmly. That's not cowardice, isn't it? I let Malone win. I let him convince the world I was a thief while he kept killing people for profit. Austin leaned forward, his voice intense. That's why I finally contacted Mike. I realized that staying hidden meant those deaths were partly on me. If I wasn't willing to risk everything to stop him, then what was the point of exposing him in the first place? Mike turned to face Austin. You did the right thing reaching out, and in 6 months, we've built an even stronger case than we had before. The evidence you preserved is ironclad. Tell me about the evidence, Valerie said, specifically what you have and what it proves. Austin pulled out a tablet from his backpack. I uploaded everything to an encrypted cloud account the day before I disappeared. I'd been paranoid about Valerix destroying physical evidence, so I'd already digitized it all. Raw data from the Neuroclear clinical trials showing they deliberately excluded high-risk patients. Internal emails between Victor Malone and the head of research discussing the cardiac risks and deciding to hide them. Financial models showing they calculated wrongful death settlements into their profit projections. He scrolled through files as he spoke, each one representing another piece of Malone's crimes. But the most damning evidence is this, an audio recording from a board meeting 2 weeks before Neuroclear launched. I'd hidden a recording device in the conference room because I suspected they were discussing the safety concerns. I got everything. Victor Malone explicitly saying the cardiac risk is acceptable given the revenue projections. We'll handle lawsuits as they come. The FDA will never pull a drug this profitable. Valerie felt a surge of fierce satisfaction. That's premeditation. That's corporate manslaughter. That's Victor Malone on tape admitting he knew the drug would kill people and didn't care. Austin's smile was grim. Everything else we have is damning, but that recording will put him in prison. When does the lawsuit file? Mike's expression darkened. That's the problem. We were planning to file in 72 hours, but something's changed. Austin, tell her what you told me this morning. Austin's face went pale. I've been living under the name David Patterson for the last 6 months, working remote tech support, staying off the grid as much as possible. This morning I got a call at my apartment. The phone rang. I answered and a voice said, "Hello, Austin. We've missed you." Then they hung up. The implications hit Valerie like ice water. They found you. They found me, which means they've known I'm alive for at least a few days, probably longer. They were waiting to see what I'd do next, who I'd contact. Austin's hands shook as he put the tablet away. They know about Mike. They probably know about you too now. We have to move up the timeline, Mike said urgently. If Malone knows Austin's alive, he's not going to wait for us to file publicly. He'll try to eliminate the threat before we can act. How soon can you file? Valerie asked. I can have the lawsuit filed by tomorrow morning, but that means Austin has to go into protective custody tonight. Federal marshals, secure location, complete isolation until this goes public, and he testifies. What about his family? They need protection too. Once we file, Malone will know we have the evidence, and he might try to use Sarah and the kids as leverage. Mike looked at Austin. You're going to have to see them sooner than we planned. We can't risk waiting. Austin's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back for 3 years. I get to see my family? We'll bring them to the safe house tonight under marshal protection. But Austin, you need to prepare yourself. They've believed you were dead for 3 years. Your kids have grieved you. Your wife has tried to move on. This is going to be traumatic for them, I know, but they need to be safe more than they need to understand right now. We'll have time to heal once Malone's behind bars. Austin turned to Valerie. How fast can you publish? I can have the story live by morning if you give me everything tonight. Full interview, access to the evidence, on the record. This has to be airtight. No room for Malone to claim it's false or biased. You'll have everything. Austin met her eyes with an intensity that spoke to 3 years of fear converting into determination. I want the world to know exactly what Victor Malone did. I want every family who lost someone to Neuroclear to see proof that it wasn't random, that it was calculated murder. I want his phone buzzed. Austin looked down at it and the color drained from his face. What is it? Mike demanded. Austin turned the phone so they could see the screen. A text from an unknown number. 4 words that made Valerie's blood freeze. Sarah's house, right now. Below the text was a photograph, time-stamped, showing it had been taken 15 minutes ago. It showed Sarah Ford standing in her kitchen, visible through the window, with Emma and Jacob doing homework at the table behind her. And in the bottom corner of the photo, barely visible, was the reflection of whoever had taken it. Someone was already at Austin's family's house. Austin was already moving before anyone could stop him, yanking open the car door. Mike grabbed his arm with surprising force, pulling him back into the seat. You can't just run in there. That's exactly what they want. That's my family. Someone's watching my wife and kids right now, and you expect me to sit here? Austin's voice cracked with panic and 3 years of suppressed desperation. Valerie's training kicked in even as her own fear spiked. Mike's right. If you show up there, whoever sent that photo will know for certain you're alive and grab you before we can protect your family. We need the marshals. I'm calling them now. Mike already had his phone out, dialing a number he'd programmed weeks ago in preparation for this exact scenario. But Austin, listen to me. Sarah and the kids are alive in that photo. If Malone wanted them dead, they'd already be dead. This is intimidation, trying to force you into making a mistake. The call connected. Marshal Davidson, this is Attorney Mike Chen. We have an active threat situation on the Ford case. I'm texting you an address right now. We need immediate protection for Sarah Ford and her 2 children. Consider the threat armed and dangerous. Valerie watched Austin's face cycle through terror, rage, and forced control. She'd interviewed dozens of people in crisis, but watching a father realize his children were being used as bait was something entirely different. How long until they get there? Austin demanded. Marshals are 7 minutes out. Local police are being dispatched now. ETA 3 minutes. Mike kept his voice steady, authoritative. Sarah's neighborhood has good response time. Whoever's there won't risk a confrontation with law enforcement showing up, unless that's not their plan. Valerie was thinking through the tactical implications. What if they're not there to grab the family? What if they're there to confirm Austin's alive by watching for his reaction? The 3 of them looked at each other, understanding, crystallizing. Austin's phone was the trap. Whoever sent that text was tracking it, waiting to see if Austin would break cover and rush to protect his family. "Give me your phone," Mike ordered, "right now." Austin handed it over. Mike powered it down completely and pulled the SIM card. "They've been tracking you through this. That's how they found your apartment, and that's how they know you're still in the city. We have to assume they know your location right now. Then we need to move," Valerie said, starting her engine. "If they know Austin's here, they could already have people on the way." "Sarah," Austin's voice was hollow, "we have to warn her. She doesn't know anyone's watching her." Mike was already dialing on his own phone. "I'm calling her now on a secure line. We set up protocols for this exact situation." The phone rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Mike's face tightened. "Sarah, it's Mike. I need you to listen very carefully. Take the kids and go to your neighbor's house, the one we discussed. Do it right now. Don't pack anything. Just go. Police are on their way. Do not go outside until they arrive." He hung up and immediately called the neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who Sarah had befriended and who Mike had quietly briefed months ago about potential danger. "Mrs. Patterson, it's Mike Chen, Sarah's attorney. I need you to go next door right now and get Sarah and her children. Bring them to your house and lock all the doors. Police are coming, should be there in 2 minutes. Tell Sarah it's about Austin and she'll understand." Valerie pulled out of the parking garage, constantly checking mirrors for tails. "Where are we going?" "Federal building downtown. It's the only place secure enough right now. Marshal Davidson will meet us there with a protection detail." Mike turned to Austin. "Your family will be brought there separately. You'll be together by midnight, I promise you." "If they survive the next 2 minutes," Austin said quietly. The silence in the car was suffocating. Valerie drove carefully, obeying every traffic law, nothing that would attract attention or suggest urgency. Every second felt like an hour. Mike's phone rang. He answered instantly. "Davidson?" "Marshals on scene at the Ford residence. We found evidence of surveillance, camera equipment mounted in a tree across the street with direct line of sight into the kitchen. No sign of the operator. They cleared out before we arrived. Local PD is sweeping the neighborhood now." "What about Sarah and the children?" "Safe at the neighbor's house, shaken but unharmed. We're moving them to a secure location now." "Your attorney, is he with you?" Mike glanced at Austin, who looked like he might break apart from relief and residual terror. "He's here. Get him to the federal building. We'll have Mrs. Ford and the children there within the hour. And counselor, whoever's running this operation is well-funded and professional. That surveillance setup was military grade." The call ended. Austin buried his face in his hands, 3 years of held-back emotion finally breaking through. "They're okay. They're really okay. For now," Valerie said, hating herself for the cold calculation, but needing everyone to understand the reality. "But Malone knows we're moving against him. He's escalating. That photo wasn't just intimidation. It was a message. He's showing us he can reach anyone anytime, which means we file the lawsuit tonight, Mike said firmly. No more waiting. Once this is public, Malone loses his advantage. That where we mean he can't make people disappear when the whole world is watching. Can you file electronically, Valerie asked. Already prepared. The moment we're in the federal building with Austin secured, I'm submitting it. Simultaneously, I'm releasing the evidence to 5 major news outlets. By dawn, Victor Malone's face will be on every screen in America. Austin looked up, eyes red but determined. And my family, what happens to them? Witness protection till Malone's arrested and convicted. New identities, new location, federal security. It's not the life you wanted, but you'll be together and you'll be alive. What about everyone else? Austin's voice gained strength. The families who lost people to Narrated. What happens to them? Valerie answered before Mike could. They get justice. Your evidence will trigger a federal investigation into Valerix. Every death connected to Narrated will be reviewed. The families will have grounds to sue, and this time they'll win. Malone's empire will collapse. 400 people dead, Austin said softly. 400 families destroyed. And for what? So Victor Malone could add another billion to his fortune? That's exactly what my article will say. Valerie's jaw set. I'm writing the headline right now. The $20 million silence, how Valerix Pharmaceuticals killed hundreds and tried to erase the man who knew. I want his name attached to every death. I want his legacy to be mass murder, not business success. They pulled into the underground parking of the federal building. Armed marshals were already waiting, a show of force that should have been reassuring, but instead hammered home how serious the threat was. As they exited the vehicle surrounded by federal protection, Mike's phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Attorney Mike Chin, I presume. The voice was smooth, educated, utterly calm. Victor Malone himself. I'm calling to offer you a different arrangement. $50 million split however you like. Walk away from this, convince your client to stay disappeared, and everyone lives happily ever after. You sent someone to watch his children. You threatened his family. I demonstrated the reality of the situation. Austin Ford can hide behind federal marshals, but protection details don't last forever. Witnesses go into programs and eventually, years later, they slip up. They contact old friends. They visit family graves. They make mistakes. And when they do, I'll be waiting. The threat was delivered with the casual confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. $50 million is a generous offer for making this problem disappear permanently. Mike's response was ice cold. In about 30 minutes, I'm filing a lawsuit that will destroy you and your company. By morning, the world will know you're a mass murderer. The only offer I'm interested in is you surrendering to federal custody before the FBI comes to arrest you. Bold words from a man whose home address I'm currently looking at. The line went dead. Mike's blood froze. Marshal Davidson was already on his radio ordering units to Mike's residence immediately, but everyone in that parking garage understood what had just happened. Victor Malone wasn't just fighting back. He was declaring total war, and he was willing to burn everything and everyone to protect his empire. The question now wasn't whether they could expose him. The question was whether any of them would survive long enough to make it matter. The secure conference room deep inside the federal building felt like a bunker, which was exactly what it needed to be. Valerie sat across from Mike while Austin paced near the window, unable to sit still while waiting for his family to arrive. 2 marshals stood by the door, weapons visible, faces professionally blank. Tell me about Victor Malone, Valerie said, needing to understand the man they were fighting. Who is he beyond the CEO title and the murder charges? Mike rubbed his temples, exhausted but running on adrenaline. Victor Malone is what happens when ambition has no moral boundaries. He came from old money, East Coast privilege, but his family lost most of their fortune in bad investments. Instead of accepting a diminished life, he rebuilt the empire through pharmaceuticals. He's brilliant, strategic, and completely amoral. He sees people as assets or obstacles, Austin added, his voice bitter, and that had not come to veer of. I worked for him for 14 years and watched him destroy careers, relationships, lives, all with the same casual indifference you'd use to delete an email. When Neuroclear's cardiac risks showed up in trials, he didn't see dead patients. He saw reduced profit margins. How did someone like that become CEO of a major pharmaceutical company? The same way predators always rise to the top in corporate America, he delivered results. Quarterly earnings, stock prices, shareholder value. The board didn't care how he achieved it, only that he did. And Victor understood something fundamental about modern corporations. If you make powerful people rich enough, they'll ignore almost anything. Valerie's recorder captured every word. You mentioned his political connections earlier. How deep do they go? Mike pulled out his tablet, showing her a web of connections he'd been mapping for months. Senator Richard Breslin is just the beginning. Malone's donated to 37 political campaigns in the last decade, both parties always strategically. He funds the campaigns of anyone on health committees, appropriations committees, anyone with oversight of the pharmaceutical industry. He's buying protection. He's buying a system. When the FDA investigates Valerix, their funding comes from Congress. When laws get proposed to increase drug safety regulations, they die in committee. When journalists start digging too deep, their editors suddenly kill the story. Victor Malone has spent 20 years building a network that makes him virtually untouchable. Until Austin refused to stay silent, Valerie said. Until I became more dangerous alive than dead, Austin corrected. That's why he tried to buy me first. $20 million was cheaper than dealing with a whistleblower scandal. When I refused, his only option was to eliminate me and discredit the evidence. The door opened and Marshall Davidson entered, followed by a woman in her late 30s with dark hair and exhausted eyes, holding the hands of two children who looked confused and frightened. Sarah Ford froze when she saw Austin, her face cycling through disbelief, shock, and something that might have been anger or joy or both. Austin? The word came out barely above a whisper. He moved toward her, then stopped, suddenly uncertain. 3 years of distance, 3 years of grief, 3 years of believing he'd abandoned them. How could he possibly bridge that gap? Mom, who's that? Emma, now 11, looked at the stranger with curiosity but no recognition. She'd been 8 when her father disappeared, young enough that his face had blurred in memory. Jacob, only 9 now, stepped closer to his mother protectively. Is he why we had to leave? Is he dangerous? The words hit Austin like physical blows. His own children didn't recognize him. Sarah's expression hardened. Everyone out, she said quietly. I need to talk to my husband alone. Mike, Valerie, and the marshals filed out quickly, leaving the family in privacy they desperately needed. In the hallway, Valerie turned to Mike. That's going to be complicated. That's 3 years of trauma meeting, 3 years of sacrifice. There's no easy resolution. Mike checked his watch, but we don't have time for family therapy right now. I need to file this lawsuit in the next 20 minutes, and I need Austin's final authorization. Do you have confirmation that your home is secure? Marshals swept it. False alarm, thankfully. Malone was playing mind games trying to rattle me, but the threat's real enough. I'm staying here tonight under federal protection. Valerie made a decision. I'm staying too. If you're filing tonight, I need to be here to break the story simultaneously. And frankly, I don't trust going home right now either. They found an empty office down the hall. Mike opened his laptop and pulled up the completed lawsuit, Ford versus Zero, Valerix Pharmaceuticals, with exhibits running to 300 pages of evidence. Years of work, months of preparation, all coming down to one keystroke. Once I hit submit, there's no going back, he said. This becomes public record immediately. Every news outlet will have access to it. Malone will know we have everything, which makes all of us bigger targets, Valerie acknowledged. But it also means we're protected by visibility. He can't make this disappear once it's public. Tell me how you're covering this. I need to know the story's being told correctly. Valerie pulled out her own laptop, showing him the article she'd been writing throughout the day. I'm leading with Austin's story. The whistleblower who discovered corporate murder, tried to expose it, got threatened into hiding, and survived 3 years in exile while the company painted him as a criminal. Then I'm detailing the evidence, the trial date of Valerix hid, the internal emails, the audio recording of Malone admitting he knew the drug would kill people. What about the families? I'm profiling 3 of them. Real names, real stories, real photos. Janet Morrison's husband, who died at 42, David Chin's mother, Marcus Thompson's sister. I want readers to see the faces of Malone's victims. Understand, these weren't statistics, but human beings with families who loved them. Mike nodded approval. That's good. Malone will try to make this about corporate liability and technical pharmaceutical regulations. You're making it about murder. Because it is murder. Premeditated, calculated, profitable murder. Valerie's voice hardened. I'm also detailing his political connections. Every senator, every representative, every FDA official who took his money or ignored evidence. This isn't just about Valerix. This is about systematic corruption that enabled mass killing. Some of those politicians will come after you. Let them. I've got documentation of every donation, every meeting, every suspicious decision that benefited Malone. If they want to sue me for defamation, discovery will be fascinating. A soft knock interrupted them. Austin stood in the doorway looking emotionally devastated but resolute. Sarah was behind him, her face streaked with tears, but her jaw set with determination. Sarah wants to make a statement, Austin said quietly, for your article. Valerie looked at the woman who'd spent 3 years believing her husband had abandoned her, who just learned he was alive and had been protecting her from the shadows. Are you sure? You don't have to, I'm sure. Sarah's voice was steady despite the tears. Victor Malone tried to destroy my family. He made my children believe their father was a thief and a coward. He stole 3 years of our lives. I want the world to know what he did to us. Okay. Valerie opened a new document, fingers poised over the keyboard. Tell me what you want people to know. Sarah took a breath, choosing her words carefully. For 3 years, I defended my husband's memory while everyone told me he'd abandoned us. The police, the media, even some of our friends, they all said Austin had stolen money and run away, but I knew him. I knew he would never leave Emma and Jacob. I knew he would never betray everything he believed in. Her voice strengthened. Victor Malone didn't just try to kill my husband. He tried to kill his reputation, his legacy, everything he was. He wanted Austin erased completely, forgotten as a criminal instead of remembered as a hero. But we didn't forget. I didn't forget, and now everyone will know the truth. Valerie typed rapidly, capturing every word. What do you want to happen to Malone? I want him in prison for the rest of his life. I want him to lose everything he values, his company, his wealth, his reputation, his freedom. I want him to understand what it feels like to be powerless, to be trapped, to have no control over your own fate. Sarah's eyes were fierce. That's what he did to my family. That's what he deserves. Mike's phone buzzed. He checked it and his expression shifted. The FBI just executed search warrants at Valeric's headquarters and Malone's private residence. They're seizing records and computers right now. How? Austin asked. We haven't even filed the lawsuit yet. I may have given the U.S. Attorney's Office a preview of our evidence this afternoon. They agreed to move simultaneously with our filing. The moment I submit this lawsuit, federal agents will arrest Victor Malone on charges of corporate fraud, manslaughter, and obstruction of justice. Valerie felt satisfaction surge through her. He doesn't know yet. He's about to find out. FBI's moving on him in the next 10 minutes. Mike positioned his laptop so they could all see the screen. Everyone ready? Austin looked at his wife, at his children visible through the office window being watched by marshals, at the evidence that had cost him 3 years of his life. File it. Mike's finger hovered over the submit button. Once I do this, everything changes. No more hiding, no more running. We stand and fight, all of us together. Good, Sarah said. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being afraid. File the lawsuit and let's end this. Mike clicked submit. The computer processed for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, then confirmed. Ford versus Valerix Pharmaceuticals had been officially filed in federal court, public record, irreversible. It's done, Mike said quietly. Now we see if justice actually means anything in this country. Valerie was already sending her article to her editor with instructions to publish immediately. Within minutes, her story would be live. Within hours, it would be everywhere. Marshal Davidson burst into the room, face grim. We have a situation. FBI just called. When agents arrived to arrest Victor Malone at his residence, they found the house empty. His security team claims he left this morning for a business trip, but there's no flight records, no credit card usage, nothing. The satisfaction drained from the room instantly. Austin voiced what everyone was thinking. He ran. He knew we were coming, and he disappeared. He's got resources to stay hidden indefinitely. Mike said, private jets, offshore accounts, properties in countries with no extradition treaties. He could be anywhere, or he could be right here in the city, Valerie said slowly, a terrible realization forming. If Malone ran, why did he bother calling you earlier to make threats? Why send that photo of Sarah's house? Those aren't the actions of someone planning to flee. The room went silent as everyone understood simultaneously. Victor Malone hadn't run away. He'd gone underground to finish what he'd started, and now he had nothing left to lose. The command center they'd established in the federal building hummed with urgent activity. FBI agents coordinated with marshals, tracking down every known associate of Victor Malone, while cyber forensics teams traced his last known digital footprints. Valerie sat with her laptop, refreshing news sites and watching her article explode across the internet. 40,000 shares in the first hour, she told Mike, who was on his third phone call with federal prosecutors. Every major outlet has picked it up. Malone's face is everywhere. Good. Visibility is our best protection right now. Mike ended his call and turned to Marshall Davidson. What's the status on Malone's known locations? Private estate in the Hamptons? Empty. Penthouse in Manhattan? Empty. Lake House upstate? Empty. His personal assistant claims she hasn't heard from him since yesterday morning. His driver says he was dropped at the office at 8 a.m. and never came out. Davidson's frustration was evident. It's like he evaporated. Austin was sitting with his family, Emma and Jacob finally understanding that the stranger was their father and processing 3 years of confusion and grief. Sarah kept one hand on Austin's arm as if afraid he might disappear again. When he caught Mike's eye, Austin carefully extracted himself and joined them. He's planning something, Austin said quietly. Victor doesn't run from problems, he eliminates them. If he's disappeared, it's because he's orchestrating an endgame. What would that look like? Valerie asked. I don't know, but Victor always thinks 3 moves ahead. Filing the lawsuit, releasing the evidence, getting the FBI involved, those were all predictable responses. He would have planned for this scenario. Austin's face was troubled. When I worked for him, I watched him destroy a competitor who tried to undercut Valerix on pricing. Victor didn't just beat them in the market, he systematically dismantled their entire company. Planted negative stories in the media, poached their best scientists, even orchestrated a scandal involving their CEO. By the time he was done, they didn't just lose, they ceased to exist. You think he's trying to discredit the evidence? Mike asked. I think he's trying to discredit all of us, the evidence, the witnesses, the entire case. If he can't make the lawsuit disappear, he'll try to make it unwinnable. Valerie's phone rang, her editor's name flashing on screen. She answered on speaker. Richard, the article's doing incredible numbers. Valerie, we have a problem. Her editor's voice was tense. I just got a call from Valeric's legal team. They're claiming your article contains fabricated evidence and they're threatening a defamation lawsuit. They're also claiming Austin Ford isn't who he says he is, that the man in your article is an imposter working with Mike to extort the company. The room went cold. That's insane, Valerie said. We have DNA evidence, fingerprints, his wife and children identified him. They're claiming all of that was staged. They've got affidavits from 3 former Valerix employees saying Austin Ford died in a car accident in Mexico 2 years ago. They're saying this whole thing is an elaborate fraud. Mike grabbed his phone, pulling up news sites. They're flooding the zone. Look at this. Multiple outlets were suddenly running stories questioning the lawsuit. Questions raised about Whistleblower's identity. Valerix claims victim of extortion scheme. Pharmaceutical giant fights back against false accusations. How are they doing this? So fast, Austin demanded. We filed the lawsuit 90 minutes ago because Malone prepared this counter-narrative in advance, Mike said grimly. He knew we'd eventually file, so he built a defensive strategy. Fake witnesses, planted documents, coordinated media response. He's trying to create enough doubt that the evidence gets dismissed. But we have the audio recording of him admitting he knew the drug would kill people, Valerie protested, which they'll claim is fabricated or taken out of context. They'll hire audio experts to testify it was doctored. They'll drag this out for years in court, spending millions on legal fees while our witnesses get exhausted and our evidence gets challenged at every turn. Mike's frustration was evident. This is exactly what powerful corporations do. They don't have to prove they're innocent. They just have to create enough confusion that the truth becomes impossible to determine. Marshall Davidson's radio crackled. Sir, we've got a situation at the front entrance. There's a crowd forming, looks like protesters. They pulled up security camera feeds. Outside the federal building, a group of about 30 people were gathering, holding signs that read, "Valorix saves lives and stop the fraud." News crews were already filming. How did protesters organize this fast, Valerie asked, but even as she said it, she knew the answer. They're paid, Austin said flatly. Victor's done this before. Hire a crowd through social media, give them signs and talking points, create the appearance of grassroots support. It's political theater designed to shape public opinion. Sarah appeared in the doorway, Emma and Jacob behind her. Austin, there are people on TV saying you're not real, that you're an actor hired to destroy the company. Emma's confused. She's asking if her father is really her father. The cruelty of it hit Valerie hard. Malone wasn't just attacking their case. He was attacking Austin's identity, his family, everything he'd sacrificed to expose the truth. We need to fight back, she said. I'll write a follow-up article, include more evidence, show the audio recording. No, Mike said suddenly, that's what he wants. He wants us scrambling to defend ourselves, getting dragged into a media war where truth becomes subjective. The more we respond to his lies, the more legitimate they seem. Then what do? Mike was thinking fast, his legal mind working through options. We go directly to the families, the people who lost loved ones to Neuroclear. They're the real evidence. Valorix can claim Austin's an imposter, but they can't fake 400 deaths. We need to make this about the victims, not about Austin. I can help with that, Valerie said immediately. I'll contact every family I've been researching. Get their stories public, show the pattern of deaths, make it impossible for Valorix to dismiss this as a hoax. Austin was staring at the security feeds, watching the fake protesters chant slogans defending the company that had tried to erase him. Victor's out there somewhere orchestrating all of this. He's got a command center just like ours coordinating his counterattack. But he made one mistake. What's that? Mike asked. He thinks this is about winning a legal battle or a media war. He thinks if he creates enough doubt, enough confusion, he can make this all go away. Austin's voice hardened with certainty. But this isn't about winning anymore. It's about making sure everyone knows what he did. Even if we lose in court, even if he somehow escapes justice, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure Victor Malone's name is synonymous with corporate murder. Sarah stepped forward, standing beside her husband. We all will. Our family became casualties of his greed. We're not going to let him erase that. Marshall Davidson's radio crackled again. Sir, FBI is requesting a video conference with the task force. They found something in Valorix's seized computers. They crowded around the large monitor as an FBI cyber analyst appeared on screen, her expression grim. We've been going through Valorix's internal communications. Most of it's encrypted, but we found something in Victor Malone's personal email server. An automated message scheduled to send if he didn't cancel it by midnight tonight. What kind of message? Mike demanded. It's addressed to 50 major news outlets, 500 influential social media accounts, and every member of Congress. The subject line is "The Truth About Austin Ford." She paused. Sir, it contains what appears to be evidence that Austin Ford has been working with a foreign intelligence service to sabotage American pharmaceutical companies, bank records showing payments from shell corporations, communications with suspected foreign agents, the works. The room reeled. That's all fake, Austin said desperately. I've never worked with anyone. I don't even have a passport. I know it's fake, the analyst cut him off gently. The metadata shows these documents were all created in the last 72 hours, but they're professionally done. If Malone releases this, if this hits the internet at midnight, it'll take days to debunk it. And in that time, the narrative shifts from pharmaceutical company covering up deaths to possible foreign espionage. That's his end game, Mike said quietly. He's not trying to prove his innocence. He's trying to bury the truth under so many layers of conspiracy theories and counter-narratives that no one knows what's real anymore. And if Austin becomes tied to foreign espionage, every piece of evidence we have becomes suspect. Valerie looked at her watch, 10:47 p.m. They had 1 hour and 13 minutes before Malone's message went out and poisoned everything they'd worked for. "Can you stop it?" she asked the analyst. "Cancel the email, delete it, something?" "We're trying, but Malone's using a sophisticated system with multiple redundancies. Even if we shut down one server, the message is backed up on others. We'd need to physically access wherever he's hiding and stop it manually." "Then we find him," Mike said. "FBI, marshals, everyone available. 1 hour to locate Victor Malone before he destroys everything." Marshal Davidson was already coordinating, but Valerie saw the doubt in his eyes. Finding one man with unlimited resources in a city of millions in under an hour was nearly impossible. Austin walked to the window, looking out at the city lights, where somewhere Victor Malone was watching his plan unfold. "I know where he is," he said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare. "What?" Mike asked. "I know where Victor is hiding. There's a place he used to go when he needed to think, to plan. An old pharmaceutical research facility that Valerick shut down 5 years ago. It's technically still owned by the company, but it's abandoned off the books. He took me there once when we were planning the Neuroclear launch. Austin's certainty was absolute. He called it his war room. That's where he is." Marshal Davidson was already pulling up property records. "Got it. Facility is 40 minutes outside the city, registered to a Valerick subsidiary. Place has been dark for years." "It won't be dark tonight," Austin said. "Victor needs computers, secure communications, privacy. That facility has all of it." The decision crystallized instantly. "We go now," Mike said. "FBI tactical team, marshals, everyone. We end this tonight." But as they prepared to move, Valerie realized the terrible calculation they were facing. If they were wrong, if Malone wasn't at that facility, they'd waste their last hour chasing shadows while his message went out at midnight and destroyed everything. And if they were right, they'd be walking into a confrontation with a man who'd already demonstrated he'd kill to protect his secrets. Either way, the next hour would determine if Austin's 3 years of sacrifice meant anything, or if Victor Malone would win after all. The convoy of black SUVs cut through the night, sirens silent, but lights flashing blue and red against the darkness. Valerie sat beside Mike in the lead vehicle while Austin rode with Marshal Davidson in the tactical unit behind them. FBI agents in full gear checked their weapons, faces grim with purpose. "What if he's not there?" Valerie asked, voicing the fear everyone felt. "Then we've lost," Mike said simply. The message goes out at midnight and Austin becomes a suspected foreign agent. Every piece of evidence we have gets tainted by espionage accusations. Malone walks free and continues killing people with impunity. The facility appeared ahead, a sprawling complex of dark buildings surrounded by rusted fencing, no lights visible, no signs of activity. For a terrible moment, Valerie thought they'd made a catastrophic mistake. Then Austin's voice crackled over the radio. "Back corner, third building. There's a faint glow in the windows, someone trying to hide their presence. He's here." FBI tactical moved into position with practiced efficiency. Marshal Davidson's voice was steady over comms. "We have thermal signatures, 3 people inside. Malone and 2 others, probably private security. We need him alive," Mike insisted. "He has to cancel that message or tell us how to stop it." The team breached the entrance with controlled force. Valerie and Mike stayed back, watching through body camera feeds as agents swept through abandoned laboratories and empty offices. Then they reached a door marked Executive Conference Room, and the cameras showed what was inside. Victor Malone sat at a large table surrounded by computer monitors, looking remarkably calm for a man whose empire was collapsing. 2 large men in tactical gear stood behind him, hands near their weapons but not drawing. On the screens behind Malone, countdown timers showed 11:43 p.m., 17 minutes until his message destroyed everything. "FBI, hands where we can see them." The tactical team had weapons raised, red laser sights painting dots across Malone's chest. He smiled, completely unafraid. "Gentlemen, I've been expecting you, though I admit I'm impressed you found me this quickly." Austin must have remembered our little tour. Victor Malone, you're under arrest for corporate fraud, manslaughter, obstruction of justice. Yes, yes. I'm aware of the charges, all very dramatic. Malone gestured to his security. My associates are going to slowly remove their weapons and place them on the ground. We're not here for a shootout. The security team complied, moving carefully as agents swarmed forward to restrain them. But Malone's composure never wavered, and that terrified Valerie more than anything. Cancel the email, Mike said, stepping into the room despite protests from marshals. Whatever you're planning to send at midnight, stop it now. Or what? Malone's smile widened. You'll arrest me? You've already done that. You'll seize my assets? They're offshore and untouchable. You'll put me in prison? He laughed. My lawyers will have me out in 72 hours, and in the meantime, my insurance policy ensures I take all of you down with me. Austin pushed past the agents, fury overriding caution. You tried to erase me, you threatened my family, you killed hundreds of people, and you think you're going to walk away from this? Malone's eyes locked onto Austin with recognition and something darker. Ah, there's the ghost I tried to bury. Tell me, Austin, was it worth it? 3 years hiding, 3 years watching your children grow up without you, 3 years of your wife crying herself to sleep. Was your moral victory worth that price? Cancel the email, Mike repeated, his voice harder. I'll make you a deal, Malone said smoothly. Drop the lawsuit, destroy the evidence, convince these families to accept my settlement offers, and I'll cancel the message. Everyone walks away intact. The countdown showed 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes left. And Victor Malone sat there completely in control, knowing they had no choice but to negotiate. Mike's response was immediate. No deal. You're going to prison regardless of what that message says. But if you send it, you add more charges: obstruction, witness tampering, conspiracy. It adds years to your sentence. I'm 72 years old, Malone said calmly. Any significant prison time is effectively a life sentence. Your threats have no teeth. He leaned back in his chair, but I'm a reasonable man. Let's discuss what happens if that message goes out. Valerie stepped forward, recorder in hand. I'm documenting all of this. Everything you say is on record. Good. Let the world hear this. Malone's confidence was chilling. That message contains fabricated evidence linking Austin Ford to foreign intelligence services. I won't insult you by pretending it's real. You'll eventually prove it's fake, probably within a week or two. But in that week, what happens? He continued without waiting for answer. Every news outlet runs the espionage angle. Congress launches investigations. Your evidence gets locked down as potential national security material. And most importantly, the families you're trying to help, those 400 people who died from Neuroclear, their lawsuits get delayed for months or years while the government sorts through spy allegations. Austin's fist clenched. You're holding their justice hostage. I'm demonstrating reality. I can't stop you from destroying my company or putting me in prison. But I can make sure those families never see compensation, never get their day in court, never get closure. Malone's mask slipped slightly, showing the ruthlessness beneath. So here's my offer. I plead guilty to corporate negligence, accept a 10-year sentence, and Valerix establishes a $5 billion victim compensation fund. The families get paid, I accept punishment, and your precious evidence never gets questioned. Mike's mind raced through the implications. It was exactly what Malone specialized in, turning defeat into negotiation, and in exchange, the message doesn't send. Austin's reputation stays intact. Your case proceeds cleanly. Everyone gets what they want. Except you admit to killing hundreds of people and accept actual consequences, Valerie said. I accept calculated consequences on my terms rather than chaotic ones on yours. Malone checked his watch. You have 11 minutes to decide. After that, the choice is made for you. Marshall Davidson spoke quietly to Mike. We've got cyber teams trying to access his system remotely, but his encryption is military grade. We can't break it in 11 minutes. Austin was shaking with rage. He killed 400 people and he's negotiating like this is a business merger. Sarah's voice came over Mike's phone on speaker from the federal building where she was watching via video feed. Don't make that deal. Victor Malone doesn't get to buy his way out of murder charges. I don't care what that message says about Austin, we'll fight through it. Sarah, if he sends that message, it could take years to get justice for those families, Mike said gently. Then it takes years. but we don't let him control the outcome. He's controlled everything else. The trial data, the FDA approval, the media narrative, Austin's disappearance. He doesn't get to control this. Malone's expression flickered with surprise. He'd expected them to cave, to accept his rational calculation over principle. 8 minutes, he said, and may I remind you, I'm the one with nothing left to lose. You're the ones gambling with those families' futures. Valerie looked at the computers, the countdown timers, the man who'd orchestrated so much death and was now weaponizing justice itself. An idea formed. You said you won't insult us by pretending the evidence is real, she said slowly, which means you're admitting on my recording that you fabricated espionage evidence to frame Austin Ford. That's a federal crime, multiple federal crimes, actually. Malone's smile faltered slightly. That recording would never be admissible. Maybe not in court. But I'm a journalist, and you just confessed to conspiracy and fraud on my recorder. I can publish that confession. Your message might create temporary chaos, but my article tomorrow will include you admitting you made it all up. She's right, Mike said, seeing the angle. You send that message, you're not creating doubt about Austin. You're creating documented proof of your own crimes. Every media outlet will have your confession. Every judge will see you admitted to fabricating evidence. The calculation in Malone's eyes shifted. He'd trapped himself in his own arrogance, confessing because he thought they had no choice but to deal. 5 minutes, he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Austin stepped closer, his voice low and fierce. You told me 3 years ago that I could take 20 million and disappear. You said everyone would forget, life would go on, and it would be like none of this ever happened. But you were wrong. Those families remember. I remember. And now 400 people are dead because you chose profit over human life. There's no deal that makes that acceptable. There's no sentence that equals that crime. But we're going to make sure everyone knows what you did. The room held its breath. The countdown showed 11:56 p.m., 4 minutes until the message sent, and chaos erupted. Malone stared at them, weighing options, calculating odds. Finally, he reached for the keyboard. You're all fools, he said quietly. Principled, self-righteous fools who don't understand how the world actually works. His fingers moved across the keys. The countdown timer stopped at 11:57 p.m. On the screens, deletion confirmations appeared. The message, the fabricated evidence, the insurance policy he'd built, all of it erasing. There, Malone said bitterly, your victory. Now arrest me and let's get this farce over with. But as FBI agents moved forward with handcuffs, Mike noticed something on the monitors. A separate program still running, files still uploading to remote servers. What else did you send, he demanded. Malone's smile returned, colder than before. Just my personal insurance. Every email, every document, every piece of evidence showing which politicians took my money, which FDA officials looked the other way, which judges ruled in my favor after campaign contributions. If I'm going down, I'm taking the entire corrupt system with me. The screens filled with uploading files, broadcasting to WikiLeaks, major news outlets, congressional oversight committees, not just evidence of Malone's crimes, but proof of systemic corruption spanning decades. You wanted to expose the truth, Malone said as agents restrained him. Congratulations. You're about to expose much more than you bargained for. The data dump hit the internet at 12:03 a.m., and within minutes, chaos erupted across Washington. Valerie watched her phone explode with notifications as newsrooms scrambled to process thousands of documents showing pharmaceutical industry corruption at the highest levels. Senator Breslin just announced his resignation, Mike said, scrolling through updates. 3 FDA officials have been placed on administrative leave. The stock market's already reacting, pharmaceutical companies down across the board. Austin stood apart, processing what had happened. They'd stopped Malone's attack on him, but in doing so, they'd triggered something much larger. He planned this all along. Even in defeat, he's creating chaos. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Sarah said quietly, watching the news feeds with Emma and Jacob finally asleep nearby. You wanted to be a voice for the voiceless. Malone just exposed how deep the corruption goes. Those documents prove it's not just one company, it's the entire system. Valerie was already writing, fingers flying across her keyboard. This is the real story. Not just Valerix, but decades of regulatory capture, political influence, and corporate power protecting itself at the expense of public safety. Marshall Davidson entered with updates, fleavidson.1.com.com. Malone's been transferred to federal detention, no bail. He's lawyered up, but prosecutors say they have more than enough for conviction, even without his cooperation. And we've had 17 more families come forward overnight, people who lost loved ones to Nuclear and are ready to testify. What about the Victims Fund he mentioned, Austin asked? The $5 billion. Valerix board held an emergency meeting an hour ago. With Malone arrested and the evidence public, they're trying to distance themselves from him. They've agreed to establish a compensation fund actually larger than what he offered, $7 billion. They want to settle before criminal charges expand to other executives. Mike allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Mike, so the families get justice and compensation. Because you refuse to let Malone control the narrative, Marshall Davidson said. If you'd taken his deal, they'd have gotten money but not truth. This way, they get both. Over the next hours, the scope of what they'd accomplished became clear. Federal prosecutors announced charges against 12 Valerix executives. The FDA launched a comprehensive review of Nuclear and 3 other Valerix drugs with questionable safety data. And most importantly, families began reaching out, sharing their stories, demanding accountability. Janet Morrison, whose husband died at 42, gave a tearful interview. We were told his death was just bad luck, an unfortunate complication. Now, we know the company knew their drug was dangerous and they sold it anyway. My husband died for their profit margin. David Chin spoke at his mother's grave, cameras recording. She trusted her doctors, trusted the system, trusted that medications approved by the FDA were safe. Victor Malone betrayed that trust. But Austin Ford gave us the truth, even when it cost him everything. Marcus Thompson stood with photographs of his sister. This isn't just about money or lawsuits. This is about making sure no other family goes through what we did. The system that let this happen needs to change. By dawn, Valerie's article had been read by 10 million people. Other journalists were following leads from Malone's data dump, exposing corruption that went far beyond pharmaceuticals. Congressional hearings were being scheduled. Reform legislation was being drafted. Austin sat with his family as sunrise broke over the city. Emma and Jacob were finally processing that their father was truly back, asking questions, sharing 3 years of missed moments. Sarah held his hand, the anger and grief slowly giving way to cautious hope. What happens now, she asked. Witness protection until Malone's trial is over, Austin said. Then we decide if we want new identities or if we try to rebuild our old lives. I want our old lives, Emma said firmly. I want to go back to school, see my friends, be normal again. We'll never be completely normal after this, Austin said gently, but we'll be together and we'll be safe. That's what matters. Mike approached with final updates. The U.S. attorney wants you to testify before the grand jury next week. After that, they're confident they'll have everything needed to put Malone away for life. Will he actually serve time? Austin asked. Men like him usually find ways to reduce sentences, get transferred to minimum security, serve a fraction of what they're supposed to. Not this time. The evidence is too solid, the crime's too egregious, and most importantly, the public is watching. Victor Malone has become the face of corporate corruption. There's no political will to protect him anymore. Valerie closed her laptop, exhausted but satisfied. I'm writing a follow-up series. Monthly updates on the families, the compensation process, the reforms. This story doesn't end with Malone's arrest. It ends when the system actually changes. Will it change, Sarah asked. Really? I don't know, Valerie admitted. But for the first time in years, there's momentum. People are angry, demanding accountability. That's how change starts. As morning light filled the room, Austin looked at the people who'd fought beside him. Mike, who'd never stopped believing. Valerie, who'd refused to let the story die. Sarah, who'd defended his memory when everyone else thought he was a criminal. And his children, who'd survived 3 years without their father and still had the capacity to forgive. Thank you, he said simply. All of you. I couldn't have done this alone. You never had to, Mike replied. That's what Malone never understood. He thought power meant standing alone, crushing anyone who threatened him. But real power is what we built together. Trust, evidence, and the refusal to let truth be buried. The story was far from over, but for the first time in 3 years, Austin Ford could breathe without fear. Victor Malone was in custody. The evidence was public. Justice, however imperfect, was being served, and 400 families finally had answers about why their loved ones died. 6 months later, Valerie returned to Mike's office for a final interview. The space looked different now, walls decorated with framed news articles about the Valerix case and thank you letters from families who'd received compensation. Malone was sentenced yesterday. Mike said, settling into his chair, 25 years, federal prison, no possibility of parole. At his age, it's effectively a life sentence. How did he react? No emotion. He gave a statement saying he was a scapegoat for an industry-wide problem, that he'd been singled out unfairly. Even in defeat, he can't accept responsibility. Valerie's recorder sat between them, just like that first interview. And the families? The compensation fund has paid out $4 billion so far. Most families have settled, though some are pursuing additional lawsuits against individual executives. Janet Morrison used her settlement to establish a foundation for drug safety advocacy. Marcus Thompson speaking at medical schools about patient safety. They're turning their grief into purpose. What about Austin? Mike's expression softened. See for yourself. He pulled up a video call. Austin appeared on screen looking healthier than Valerie had ever seen him. Behind him, Emma and Jacob were visible doing homework at a kitchen table. Sarah walked past carrying groceries. You're not in witness protection, Valerie observed. Decided we didn't want to hide anymore. We're back in our old house. Kids are in their old schools. It's been an adjustment, but we're making it work. Austin's smile was genuine. Emma's teacher asked her to write about her most interesting experience. She wrote about the time her dad became a whistleblower and changed pharmaceutical regulations. How are you doing, really? Some days are harder than others. I still look over my shoulder sometimes. Still have moments where I can't quite believe it's over. But I'm seeing a therapist. Sarah and I are working through everything, and the kids are remarkably resilient. He paused. I'm also working with congressional staffers on proposed reforms to the FDA approval process, trying to make sure this can't happen again. Do you regret it? Valerie asked. Everything you lost, the 3 years of hiding, the trauma to your family. Do you ever wish you'd taken Malone's $20 million and walked away? Austin was quiet for a long moment. I'd be lying if I said there weren't moments I thought about it. Moments when I was hiding in my car, watching my daughter's birthday party through social media photos, wondering if I'd made the right choice. His voice strengthened. But those 400 people who died, they didn't get a choice. Their families didn't get a choice. If I'd stayed silent, if I'd taken that money, I'd have been complicit in their deaths. I couldn't live with that. What do you want people to take away from this? That speaking truth to power has real costs, but silence has higher ones. That one person with evidence and courage can challenge billion-dollar corporations, and that justice is possible even when it seems impossible. Austin looked directly at the camera, but also that you can't do it alone. I had Mike who believed me, Valerie who told my story, Sarah who stood by me, and hundreds of families who refused to accept the lies. That's what changed things. The call ended, and Valerie looked at Mike. What's next for you? I've had 73 families reach out with similar stories about other pharmaceutical companies, drugs that were rushed to market, safety data that was buried, regulators who looked the other way. The Valerix case opened floodgates. Mike's determination was clear. I'm building a practice focused exclusively on holding pharmaceutical companies accountable, using Austin's case as a blueprint. The voice for the voiceless is practice. Exactly. These companies count on people being too scared, too exhausted, too isolated to fight back. But if we can connect the victims, share the evidence, coordinate the legal strategies, we can win. Valerie closed her notebook. Last question. Do you think the system will actually change? Mike considered carefully. Malone's data dump exposed corruption that went beyond anything we imagined. 3 senators have resigned. 8 FDA officials have been fired or prosecuted, and Congress passed the most significant pharmaceutical regulation reform in 30 years. So yes, things have changed. But But the fundamental dynamic remains. Corporations still prioritize profit over safety. Politicians still take campaign contributions from industries they regulate. The FDA is still underfunded and overwhelmed. We won this battle, but the war continues. Then why keep fighting? Because 400 families have justice they wouldn't have had otherwise. Because Austin Ford can sleep in his own bed instead of hiding in fear. Because the next whistleblower who discovers corporate wrongdoing will know they're not alone, that speaking up is possible. Mike's voice filled with conviction. That's why we keep fighting, not because we'll win every time, but because the alternative is letting people like Victor Malone operate without consequences. Valerie packed up her equipment, the final interview complete. Her series on the Valerix case had won awards, sparked congressional action, and fundamentally changed how pharmaceutical companies operated. But the real impact was quieter, more personal. Families had answers. A whistleblower had vindication. And the message was clear: even the most powerful can be held accountable. As she left Mike's office, Valerie thought about all the stories still waiting to be told, all the corporate wrongdoing still hidden, all the families still suffering in silence. The work wasn't done. But thanks to Austin Ford, Mike Chen, and 400 families who refused to be forgotten, the world knew that truth could still matter, that justice was still possible, and that courage could still change everything. The $20 million secret was no longer a secret, and Victor Malone would spend the rest of his life paying for the lives he destroyed. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoy this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.